While I was hospitalized, my family charged a luxury cruise to my credit card. When I called my husband in tears, he didn't apologize. He just laughed and said, "I'm at work. Relax." The next 5 minutes exposed a betrayal I never imagined. I woke up feeling like every part of my body had been stitched back together. My mouth was dry, my head felt heavy, and the steady beeping of the heart monitor reminded me I was still in the hospital. I reached for my phone, hoping to see a message from my husband asking how I was doing. Instead, a fraud alert covered the screen. My credit card had been charged $18,742 by Ocean Crown Cruises. My heart started pounding. I thought someone had stolen my card, so I called Dean without wasting a second. He answered almost immediately. His voice sounded strangely cheerful. "Relax," he said. "I'm at work. Everything's fine." Before I could ask another question, he ended the call. My hands shook as I opened my banking app. The cruise charge wasn't the only payment. There were charges for luxury dining, spa packages, and expensive upgrades, all made while I was unconscious in surgery. None of it made sense. Then I opened social media. The first photo stopped me cold. Dean stood on the deck of a huge cruise ship with his sister Lana, his brother Mark, and several relatives. They held champagne glasses high, smiling like they didn't have a single worry. Another picture showed them by the pool. Another showed a fancy dinner with seafood towers and cocktails. Every smiling face felt like another knife in my chest. He wasn't at work. He was on vacation. And they were spending my money while I was lying alone in a hospital bed, wondering if I was going to be okay. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. My chest tightened so badly that one of the nurses noticed the change on the monitor and hurried over to check on me. I forced a smile and told her I was fine. The truth felt too unbelievable to say out loud. How could I explain that the people who were supposed to care about me had left the country using my money while I was recovering from emergency surgery? As soon as the nurse walked away, I started making calls. Dean ignored my first 2 attempts. When he finally answered, I didn't even try to hide my tears. "What is this?" I asked. "Why are you on a cruise? Why are these charges on my card?" He sighed like I was interrupting his day. "Nina, calm down. We already paid the deposits months ago. If we canceled now, everyone would lose money. You're in good hands at the hospital. We'll be back before you know it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So my surgery didn't matter? It wasn't like we could do anything for you from here," he replied. "You're recovering. Just focus on getting better." Then he ended the call again. I refused to believe everyone thought the same way, so I called his sister, Lana. She answered with loud music playing in the background. "Lana, did you know they charged everything to my card?" She didn't sound embarrassed. "Nina, the whole family has been looking forward to this trip. You're not the only person in this family. Everyone deserves a break." "A break that I paid for?" "You'll earn the money back," she said without hesitation. "Don't make such a big deal out of it." Before I could answer, she hung up. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. Next I called Mark. He laughed the moment he heard my voice. "Come on, Nina. By the time we get home, you'll probably be walking around like nothing happened." I was unconscious when those charges were made. "So, Dean has access to your cards, doesn't he?" His careless tone made my stomach turn. One by one, I called every relative who had gone on that trip. Some ignored me completely. Others acted annoyed that I was disturbing their vacation. Not one person apologized. Not one person asked how I was feeling after surgery. They talked about beaches, dinners, excursions, and sunsets as if those things mattered more than the fact that I had been lying in a hospital bed, unable to defend myself. When the last call ended, I finally understood the truth. This hadn't been one selfish decision by Dean. Every single one of them knew exactly where I was. Every single one of them knew whose money they were spending. And not one of them believed they had done anything wrong. The days that followed felt longer than the surgery itself. Every morning I opened my eyes hoping someone from my family had finally come to see me. I listened for footsteps outside my room, expecting Dean to walk through the door with flowers or at least an apology. But every knock belonged to a nurse, another doctor, or someone delivering medication. The nurses quickly realized I had no visitors. They stayed a little longer whenever they could, asking if I needed water or if I wanted someone to help me walk around the hallway. One of them even sat with me during her break after noticing I had been staring out the window for nearly an hour. Their kindness came from people who barely knew me, yet it felt more genuine than anything I had received from my own family. My phone never stopped buzzing. For one brief moment, each notification gave me hope. Maybe Dean had finally realized what he'd done. Maybe someone wanted to apologize. Instead, my screen filled with vacation updates. There was a picture of everyone gathered around a huge table covered with lobster, steak, and desserts. Another showed them laughing beside a crystal blue pool. Then came videos of beach excursions, snorkeling trips, and shopping bags from expensive boutiques. Every smiling face reminded me that each meal, every souvenir, and every activity had been charged to my credit card. I tried putting my phone away, but curiosity always pulled me back. I kept wondering if someone would finally admit they had crossed a line. They never did. The only messages I received were practical ones. Dean texted once to ask if I had paid the electricity bill before going into surgery because he couldn't remember the password to the account. A few hours later, Lana asked where I had bought one of my suitcases because she wanted to get the same brand for another vacation. Neither of them asked how my recovery was going. I stared at those messages for a long time before locking my phone. That hurt more than the cruise itself. I wasn't simply being ignored. I had become an afterthought. Each evening, I watched the sun disappear beyond the hospital window while families gathered around other patients, bringing food, flowers, and laughter into their rooms. Mine stayed silent except for the steady rhythm of medical equipment. For the first time in my marriage, I stopped waiting for someone to come through the door. Deep inside, I knew I was already facing this battle alone. 5 days after my surgery, the door to my hospital room finally opened, and for a split second I felt relieved. I thought Dean had come because he realized how badly he had hurt me. I imagined he would sit beside my bed, hold my hand, and tell me he was sorry. Instead, he walked in wearing a bright blue t-shirt with the cruise company's logo stretched across the front. A pair of sunglasses rested on his head, and his skin looked darker from days in the sun. In one hand he carried a paper gift bag. "Hey," he said with a grin as if he'd just come home from a normal work trip. "How are you feeling?" I looked at him without saying a word. He placed the bag on my bedside table. "We brought you something." Inside was a cheap ceramic mug with the cruise ship's name printed on the side. "It probably cost less than $20. I thought you'd like it," he said. I slowly took it out of the bag, turned it over once, then set it back down. "You used my credit card to buy me a souvenir?" I asked quietly. Dean shrugged. "Well, technically yes. But it's the thought that counts." Before I could respond, he pulled out his phone. "You have to see the pictures," he said excitedly. The weather was perfect almost every day. He began swiping through photo after photo without noticing the expression on my face. There he was smiling beside the pool. Another picture showed him eating at a fancy restaurant. Then came videos of live music, dancing, and fireworks over the ocean. He laughed while describing one evening when Mark slipped on the pool deck after having too many drinks. "You should have seen it," Dean said. Everyone was laughing. I didn't smile. Then his mood changed. "You know what, though? Everything on that ship was ridiculously overpriced. Drinks, snacks, even Wi-Fi. They charge you for everything." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was complaining about vacation expenses that had come from my account while I was recovering from surgery. A few minutes later, Lana and Mark stepped into the room carrying balloons that looked like they had been picked up at the hospital gift shop. "We're back," Lana announced cheerfully. Mark placed a box of chocolates on the table. "See," he said. "We didn't forget about you." They talked over each other, sharing funny stories from the trip as if I had simply missed a family picnic instead of being left behind during one of the hardest moments of my life. Not one of them said the words, "We're sorry." Not one of them asked how frightened I had been before surgery or how painful recovery had become. They truly believed a souvenir mug, a box of chocolates, and a few balloons could erase what they had done. As I watched them laugh together in my hospital room, something inside me became very quiet. I stopped hoping they would understand. I stopped expecting them to feel guilty. And in that silent moment, I realized the people standing around my bed no longer felt like family at all. After everyone left that afternoon, my hospital room became quiet again. I sat alone, staring at the souvenir mug on the table beside my bed. A week earlier I would have smashed it against the wall. I would have screamed until someone finally admitted they had crossed a line. Instead, I picked it up, placed it back inside the gift bag, and pushed it into the corner. Something inside me had changed. I wasn't calm because I had forgiven them. I was calm because I finally understood exactly who they were. The next morning I opened my laptop and logged into every financial account I owned. I downloaded each bank statement and saved copies in several folders. Then I printed every page I could access from the hospital business center. I highlighted every charge made while I was in surgery and every purchase that followed during my recovery. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The first payment appeared only minutes after I had been taken into the operating room. More charges followed while I remained under anesthesia. Restaurant bills, excursions, shopping, spa treatments, drink packages, and onboard purchases continued over the next several days. I took screenshots of everything. Then I went through my phone. I saved every text message from Dean, Lana, and Mark. I kept every voicemail they had left before the trip and after they returned. I even downloaded every photo and video they had proudly shared online. Each smiling picture told the same story. They had never tried to hide what they were doing because they believed I would never challenge them. My nurse helped me request copies of my medical records. A hospital administrator explained the process, and within 2 days I received documents showing the exact time my surgery began, when I was under anesthesia and when I regained consciousness. Those records answered every question. I could not have approved a single charge. Every document fit together like pieces of the same puzzle. When Dean visited again, I acted differently. I thanked him for bringing me coffee. I asked about work. I listened while he talked about everyday things as though nothing unusual had happened. He looked relieved, probably thinking time had softened my feelings. He even joked that I was finally getting over the cruise drama. I forced a small smile. If you say so. That was all I gave him. He never noticed that my laptop closed whenever he entered the room. He never asked why I suddenly wanted printed bank records or why I spent so much time organizing paperwork. He assumed silence meant acceptance. It didn't. It meant I had stopped arguing with people who refused to hear the truth. From that moment on, I said very little. I simply watched, listened, and collected everything they willingly handed me. For the first time since waking up after surgery, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about proof. A week after I was discharged from the hospital, I returned home. Dean acted as if life had gone back to normal. He talked about work, watched television in the evenings, and even started planning another weekend trip with his family. It was almost unbelievable how comfortable he seemed. He never asked whether I had forgiven him because he had already convinced himself that I had. The spending didn't stop either. Every few days another charge appeared on our account. Expensive dinners, online shopping, and entertainment purchases kept showing up. Dean used my credit card without hesitation, completely certain I would never question him. I didn't say a word. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with my bank. The fraud specialist carefully reviewed every statement I had printed. She compared the transaction times with my hospital records and frowned. "Did you authorize any of these purchases?" she asked. "No." "Were you even able to use your phone during surgery?" "I was unconscious." She nodded and made several notes before referring my case to the bank's fraud department. The next stop was an attorney's office. I placed my files on the conference table one by one. Bank statements, medical records, screenshots, text messages, photos from the cruise. The attorney spent nearly an hour reading through everything before looking up. "You've documented this very well," she said. "Keep gathering evidence, but don't confront him yet." A few days later, I met with the fraud investigators assigned to my case. They asked detailed questions about our finances, our home, and who had access to my cards. Then one investigator asked something I hadn't considered. "Do you have security cameras at your house?" "We have one by the front door and another covering the living room." "Good. Let's see the recordings from the day you went to the hospital." When the footage loaded, my stomach tightened. The video showed paramedics helping me out of the house on a stretcher while Dean followed behind carrying my overnight bag. About 20 minutes later, after the ambulance had already left, Dean walked back inside alone. The camera in the living room captured him picking up my purse from the kitchen counter. He opened it, removed my wallet, took out my credit cards, slipped them into his pocket and quietly walked away. No hesitation. No confusion. He knew exactly what he was doing. The investigator paused the video and looked at me. "This is important," he said. "From now on, don't tell him we're investigating. Let him believe everything is normal." I nodded. For the first time, I realized I wasn't relying on my memory anymore. The truth had been recorded. And Dean had no idea it was waiting for him. The investigators told me the timing mattered. Once everything was ready, they would move quickly. Until then, I continued acting like nothing had changed. Dean had no reason to be suspicious. He still believed I had accepted his excuses and moved on. Then on a quiet Tuesday morning, I received the call I had been waiting for. "We're ready," the fraud investigator said. "If you want to proceed, we'll begin today." I didn't hesitate. "Do it." Within minutes, I signed the final paperwork and officially reported every charge I had not approved. I listed each restaurant bill, every excursion, the shopping purchases, the spa treatments, and the original cruise payment. Nothing was left out. The bank immediately placed restrictions on our shared accounts while the investigation moved forward. My credit cards were disabled to prevent any new transactions. The case was also sent to the cruise company's fraud department because the vacation itself had been paid for with disputed funds. I spent the rest of the day at home waiting. It didn't take long. Just after lunch, my phone rang. Dean's name appeared on the screen. "What did you do?" he shouted the second I answered. "My card just got declined at a gas station." I kept my voice steady. "I reported unauthorized charges." "You froze everything?" I reported what happened. He started yelling that I had embarrassed him in public before hanging up. Less than 10 minutes later, Lana called. She sounded nothing like her usual confident self. "Nina, someone from the cruise company contacted me. They asked who authorized the payment for our cabin. What's going on?" "I guess they're investigating." "You need to fix this," she snapped. "I can't stop an investigation." The calls kept coming. Mark wanted to know why someone from the bank had asked questions about the trip. Another relative said they had been contacted about purchases made on board. Everyone suddenly wanted answers from me, even though none of them had cared about mine while I was lying in a hospital bed. By evening, the family group chat had turned into complete chaos. Messages poured in every few seconds. "Who reported this?" "They're asking for receipts." "This has gone too far." "Someone make Nina call the bank." For the first time since my surgery, they weren't talking about beaches or fancy dinners. They were worried about themselves. I didn't reply to a single message. I simply watched as panic spread through the same family that had laughed together on that cruise ship. The silence they had given me in the hospital had finally found its way back to them. The front door slammed so hard that the windows rattled. "Where are you?" Dean shouted before I even saw him. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. I didn't move. He stormed into the room, his face red with anger. "What have you done?" he demanded. "The bank froze everything. I can't use the joint account. My cards don't work. Do you have any idea what kind of mess you've created?" I looked at him calmly. "I didn't create it." He threw his wallet onto the table. "This is insane. We can't even pay for groceries." "You should probably talk to the bank," I replied. "They said there's a fraud investigation." "That's right." For a moment he simply stared at me. It was the first time he realized I wasn't going to back down. Before he could speak again, his phone rang. It was Lana. He answered on speaker without thinking. "They called me again," she cried. "Now they're asking when we found out Nina was in the hospital. What am I supposed to tell them?" Dean walked into the living room, but I could still hear every word. "Just stick to the story," he whispered. "What story?" Mark's voice suddenly joined the call. "You told us everything was fine. You said Nina wouldn't care." "I never said that," Dean fired back. "You absolutely did," Mark argued. "You told everyone she was unconscious and we'd deal with it later." Within seconds, the conversation turned into shouting. Lana blamed Dean for using my card. Dean insisted everyone had enjoyed the trip, so nobody had the right to complain now. Another relative jumped into the call, saying they only went because Dean promised he had permission to use the money. Excuses flew in every direction. Nobody was protecting anyone anymore. Later that evening, my attorney called with an update. "The investigators recovered several group messages," she explained. "They show the family discussing your surgery before boarding the ship." She read one message aloud. "Dean, she's already in surgery. We'll leave for the port now." A few minutes later, Lana replied. "She won't even know until she wakes up." Then Mark added, "Good. Let's enjoy the trip and deal with the drama later." I closed my eyes. Seeing those words hurt, but they also erased any remaining doubt. They hadn't misunderstood the situation. They had planned around it. The people who had smiled together for vacation photos were now turning against each other, trying to escape responsibility. The family that had stood together on the cruise ship was falling apart, and this time, no one could blame me for what was happening. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Once every document had been collected, there was very little left to argue about. Facts replaced excuses and every piece of evidence supported the one before it. I attended each meeting with my attorney carrying the same organized folders I had started putting together in the hospital. Nothing had been exaggerated or hidden. Every page told the story exactly as it happened. The bank records showed the timeline of every transaction. The first charge appeared only after my surgery had already started. More purchases followed while I remained under anesthesia, and the spending continued throughout my recovery. The amounts matched the cruise company's receipts down to the last dollar. My hospital records confirmed I was unconscious when those payments were approved. Nurses' notes, operating room reports, and recovery logs left no room for doubt. I had been fighting through surgery while my credit cards were paying for a vacation. Then came the security footage. The video clearly showed Dean returning to our house after I had been taken to the hospital. He opened my purse, removed my credit cards, slipped them into his pocket and left without hesitation. Watching it again was painful, but it answered the biggest question in the case. He hadn't acted by accident. He had prepared for it. The investigators also recovered the family messages. Every conversation showed they knew exactly where I was before they boarded the ship. Nobody questioned whether using my money was wrong. Instead, they discussed how I wouldn't find out until I woke up. Reading those messages in an official report made my stomach sink, but they revealed the truth more clearly than any argument ever could. When the divorce hearings began, Dean tried to defend himself. He claimed we were married, that we shared finances, and that he believed I would have agreed if I had been awake. The evidence said otherwise. The judge carefully reviewed the documents, the bank records, the hospital timeline, the security video, and the messages exchanged before the cruise. After a long silence, the judge explained that this was not a simple disagreement between spouses. It showed a deliberate decision to use my finances while I was unable to protect myself. Hearing those words lifted a weight I had carried for months. For so long, Dean had tried to convince me I was overreacting. His family had treated everything like an unfortunate misunderstanding. Now the truth stood on its own. No excuses. No twisted explanations. Just clear proof that the people I trusted had taken advantage of me at the moment I was most vulnerable, and the lies they had relied on from the beginning could no longer protect them. By the time everything was over, the cruise had become the smallest part of the story. The court finalized my divorce and I walked out carrying nothing except a folder of documents and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. My bank restored my accounts, removed the fraudulent charges, and helped me secure everything with new cards, passwords, and protections. For the first time in months, I felt completely in control of my own life again. Dean paid a much higher price than he ever expected. He lost our marriage, his financial stability, and the respect of the people he thought would always stand beside him. As the investigation ended, several relatives were required to repay the money connected to the vacation. The family that had once defended him quickly distanced themselves when they realized they would also face the consequences of their choices. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I simply moved forward. I found a new apartment, filled it with things that brought me comfort, and slowly rebuilt a life that no longer depended on people who had broken my trust. Recovery wasn't only about healing from surgery anymore. It was about learning that peace is worth protecting. Sometimes I think about the morning I woke up in that hospital bed and saw the fraud alert on my phone. At the time it felt like the worst moment of my life. Now I see it differently. If that charge had never appeared, I might have spent years believing I was surrounded by people who loved me. Instead, the truth arrived when I needed it most. The surgery repaired my body. What happened afterward opened my eyes. Losing the people who betrayed me wasn't the tragedy I once believed it would be. It was the beginning of a better life, built on honesty, self-respect, and the freedom to never again place my trust in those who had never truly earned it.